Hi. So I want to talk a little bit about what I'm coming to think of as the 4 strategies that we need to take to reach the Omni-Win future. And just to recap for how we got here. So my hypothesis is that pretty much everyone in the world agrees that things aren't working, but things don't seem to be changing. But it also seems to me that amongst different fields, we have the answers to most of the questions that we need. There's people who know how to help us communicate. There's people who have thought out what the future could look like in a transpartisan way. And so there's all these different people working on this, but we're not using these tools. And so my hypothesis is that either we don't know that those things are out there, and so they need to be amplified, or they're not recognizing that they're all part of a united movement, and maybe they're not actually talking to each other. So one of the goals of the Omni-Win Project is to amplify all these methods and people and organizations and movements and so forth that are out there trying to improve our democracy. And then I also want to put them in conversation with each other. So I'm going to be, over the next months and years, lifting up their voices and then creating spaces for them to talk to each other and share ideas. And I want to be sharing them with you as well. I've become quite a collector of these, and I want to show you this map that I've been making of that. So this is a mind map that I made of the different kinds of folks that might be interested in this kind of work, or that I see are talking about it or thinking about it, and they range across a bunch of different categories. Of course, there's different artists, journalists, authors, podcasters, movie makers that are thinking about this kind of stuff. There's also people who are thinking about it in the kind of neuroscience way, and then there's all sorts of philosopher type folks. There's the game B folks and the sense makers and the integral post-progressives, and there's people trying to understand polarity thinking, and then there's practitioners and dialogue and politics and democracy reform folks and actually politicians that are doing this kind of work. And so all of those different categories are out there. I've been thinking about how to organize this. I got an idea from a workshop that I went to at the National Conference on Dialogue and Deliberation in Austin, Texas, probably over a decade ago, I suppose. In this workshop, they actually divided the whole room into 4 categories with some masking tape, and they pointed out that there are 4 strategies for making change. There's educate people, so change people's minds. Then there's change behaviors, make different rules or ways for people to do things. Then there was changing systems, what are the laws and the structures that are around them. And there's changing culture. And they asked us each to go stand in the one that we thought might be the most strategic. And then we had conversations amongst ourselves about why we thought our idea was the most strategic way of doing this. And as you might imagine, what came out of it was that all of these are important and influence each other. And so I've been organizing my thinking around the Omni-Win Project in a similar way. So taking that whole rainbow spaghetti that I had created, and I started organizing it all into what I'm thinking of as 4 categories, 4 overarching themes of the Omni-Win Project. I'm going to go ahead and show them to you here in just a little Google Doc that I've been putting together. In one category, we have the people who are trying to help people learn how to do the personal individual growth. And they're answering this question about how can individuals accept ourselves and each other and understand our interrelatedness and adopt the value of omnipartiality, or being partial to everyone, as a way of guiding our actions. And so in this field, I see that there's all sorts of great work on authentic self and self-awareness. How do we express ourselves better? How do we recognize the relationship of ourself and the other person, quality of relationships? How can we be self-reliant? Then there's this world of science, which seems to be covering both understanding just the neuroscience of our politics and our tribalism, but also being part of human evolution. And then we have tribal survival needs. And then there's also just the awareness of ourself and our equanimity. And that comes into mindfulness. And also just like, how do we develop the capacity for love and mercy and justice and forgiveness? Then, of course, there's skills that we all need. Sense making and complexity and systems thinking, communication. So then in the second category, which isn't just about behavior, but it's really about the relationships. And we have collaborative communication tools. And these folks have the tools to create interpersonal relationships and effectively include diverse perspectives in decision making. And I see that field in sort of two ways. There's the world of conflict transformation, people doing mediation and peace building and so forth. But then there's also people who are experts at dialogue, group facilitation, and deliberative processes. And there's also a lot of people that are doing work on healing the divide, creating circle processes. We have people coming up with systems for better democracy, democratic participation, and how can we upgrade our democracies so that there's true participation, deliberative processes. And I see this in two big categories. There's the people trying to work to design participatory democracy systems like citizen assemblies and deliberative democracy and digital large-scale collaboration tools. And then, of course, there's people who are actually working on the actual legislation, either as activists or as politicians, and changing the laws that can change our world. And finally, there's this cultural level, and it's like the philosophical corner. But these folks seem to be offering frameworks that can help us transcend polarization, understand our interdependence, and develop different approaches that can meet everyone's needs. And so that's the whole folks of Game B, which is people who are thinking about the next rules of the future civilization, which includes anti-rivalry. There's folks that are really talking about the importance of sense making. And then there's integral theory folks, which includes post-progressives and meta-ideological thinking, meta-politics. There's polarity thinking, and these are folks that have helped us learn how to manage polarities. And then there's values of nonviolence, and which for me is like a whole philosophical strategy. And then there's also a lot of people who are doing work on how can we integrate the lessons of the past, the experiences of the present, and what we're looking for in the future. So these are all people that I want to start putting into conversation with each other. Perhaps you recognized any names from this list, or you recognize organizations from this. Actually, I would love if you put me in touch with anyone who you think might fit into one of these categories. As I'm building out my website, I'm also going to be making sure that there's a resource library so you can access all of these different folks, their books and their websites and the kind of work that they're doing. And I really look forward to helping these folks recognize that they're all part of one big movement and to create a space for them and for you to interact with us. I'm going to be rotating through these themes. So you'll notice as I'm making videos and as podcasts start coming out that I will be touching on these different 4 large-scale themes, as well as sort of digging deep into each of them. If you want to stay tuned to find out what it looks like when I start unpacking all of these different approaches to creating the Omni-Win future for all of us, you should come join us. I would say the best way to do that would be to subscribe on Substack. You can find me as omniwin.substack.com. Coming soon, there'll be a website and various things. But for now, that's the best way to stay tuned. Wherever you found this, subscribe. It's totally great to have you. And I am so excited to share all of these worlds with you.